All right. Hey guys, it is podcast live day, and I did this on the YouTube last week, and there wasn't anybody that came to the YouTube because everybody's here on Facebook, and so I thought maybe I would go ahead and give the Facebook Live thing a try. If anybody's around when I'm done recording this podcast for the week, I would love to do some Q&A and whatever that may be on your mind. So we are going to be talking about why denominations don't suck. And for me, that's one of those things that I think in the back of my mind, I guess I kind of think, I think a lot of times I think that denominations do suck because I hate committees and institutionalism and institutions and all that kind of stuff. That it's just not who I am. So there are times when I got to think about this and kind of answer this question for myself about why don't denominations suck. So that's what I'm going to be talking about on the podcast, and so hang around, watch if you want, wait for the podcast to drop later today, and you can just listen to it. I would love for you to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, wherever you listen to podcasts, yeah, so here we go. We're going to talk about why denominations don't suck. We're going to record this thing for posterity, I guess, on the podcast, and the video will be also available later. So here we go. All right. I always screw up the starting of the recording, so we'll see if I can not screw it up this time. Gonna check the sounds. There we go. And we're gonna see how this whole thing goes here. So, all right. Welcome to Be Awesome and Don't Suck. I am your host, Dan Rose. Glad you are with me this week. And again, trying this whole live broadcast, live video. So for those of you who are listening on the podcast, if I sound a little bit more awkward than I normally am, which is tough to do, it's because I'm talking at a video camera and it's weird. Lots been going on this week. Football last week was tough, and our splitters did not have the best week on the football field. That's all right. We bounced back this week, and they get to go again. So hopefully they take care of their business Friday night against Chelsea, and puts us in a position to win the league, which would be a lot of fun. Onto the podcast and why you're listening, because you really don't probably care about my thoughts on high school football. But Be Awesome, Don't Suck is kind of my attempt to think through different aspects of my life and ministry, and maybe how those things apply to the world a little bit. And so I'm glad you're listening, and for those of you on Facebook Live, glad you're checking in here. And if you are listening on the podcast, know that I'm going to start doing this Facebook Live thing every week. And if you pop on there and you hang around after I'm done, we can do some Q&A and talk about whatever might be on your mind. So our topic this week is why don't denominations suck? I grew up in my faith with Cru, and Cru is what's called an interdenominational organization, and so they don't ask you to check your denominational leanings at the door, but there was kind of this underlying thing where denominations aren't necessarily the best the best things, that we need to kind of set aside the stuff from denominations and really try to unify around what ultimately matters, which I think in a lot of ways makes a lot of sense. And so in my, I guess in my formational years as a Christian, I really questioned denominations and why do we need them? Are they kind of purposeless, especially in today's day and age? But as I've grown, as I've been a part of churches, and now that I'm a pastor, I have really come to appreciate denominations. I really have. And so in the last couple of months, we are really seeing how a denomination can impact or influence our local church here, because we've had to do some more institutional kind of things, right? This summer or late spring, early summer there, the Antioch movement, which is the congregation that we started here in Ypsilanti, became what's called a particular church in our denomination, and all that means is we became official. We've got some different designations for different church types in our denomination, and one of them is a mission church, is what we've been for the last, what we were really since we started. And what that means is we don't have a local leadership that we call a session. And so, and our session is made up of elders, which is just a fancy term, Bible term for leader or local leader. And we didn't have those yet. And so we worked hard, we trained a couple of people, and those folks have come on board now. So we have our local session, our local leaders, Todd Waller and Polly Szynski are our first elders, and that was really exciting. So we became this official church, and because we're an official church, now the church can hire me or call me as a pastor. And so that's happening this Sunday. And so it's just got me thinking quite a bit about denominations and, and why is it that denominations don't suck? So here's the first thing. Connectional. That is a word. If you hang around us Presbyterians, you hear this word connectional or connectionalism a lot. And it's a really significant and central part of why I think denominations don't suck. There is something about being able to connect into this group of people. These other pastors, these other local leaders, whether you want to call them teaching elders, ruling elders, those are our fancy terms for pastors and local leaders in our denomination. And then every quarter or so we gather, and I've not been the best at showing up to these meetings called presbytery, but when I do, it feels like kind of going home in a sense. We are able to talk and connect with one another in ways that maybe other folks can't connect with us. There are certain struggles, there are certain stresses, there's certain issues that pastors especially and local church leaders especially face that other people don't, that other people may not be wrestling with. And so to know that there is a group of people out there who are kind of thinking and wrestling with these similar things that I can regularly meet with, and I know who I can connect with, that's really, really helpful. When I first became a pastor, this whole idea of connectionalism was really, really important for me to figure out who were some other like-minded guys that I could just build friendships with so that I wasn't alone, so that I wasn't isolated. in my ministry. And now that we've been here in Ypsilanti and I've been launching this new congregation, those relationships that I built early on have become even more important, because as we started this thing, we needed oversight. I needed somebody to help give some accountability and leadership and those kinds of things. And because I had those relationships in our denomination, I knew men and women that I could call to be a part of this and to help this. And so I think one of the most important things for denominations is that connecting piece. My good friend Mike, who's a Methodist pastor here in town, every summer they go to clergy camp is what they call it. And so all these pastors, all these clergy in Michigan from the Methodist Church, they all get together and they hang out and they have fun and they worship and they sing and they talk and they just connect richly and deeply with one another. And while that can happen outside of a denomination, what the denomination does is it provides a structure that allows for easier connection between these people who have this very unique job and are living these unique and different lives that many people do not do or don't wrestle with the same kinds of things that we do. And so that's the first thing, connectionalism. The second thing, and I think in today's day and age might be the most important, is accountability. The accountability that a denomination provides for its leaders is significant, right? We live in a day and age where people don't like to be held accountable, where people want to be able just to go out and do all their own thing. And now with technology and everything else that's going on, we can pretty much do that. You can go start a church. You can get ordained on the internet in 2.5 minutes for $50, and then you can start your own church. And I don't know how great that is. I'd argue it's probably not good. And so what the whole denomination thing does, though, is it provides accountability for people who would be pastors, for people who would lead congregations. And this accountability is for, are we growing in our relationships with God? Are we leading well? Are we doing any kind of like spiritual abuse of people? There are tons of stories of mega pastors in the last 5 years who have built their ministries on the back of spiritual abuse, and they've had no accountability because the accountability structures that are in place are all people that they chose, are all people that are yes people. Well, when you're a part of a denomination, you can't get away with that because there are structures and there are processes to hold you accountable. When you start kind of going off the rails into a bad way, into a bad place, there are ways that the people who you're hurting can enter in and engage with you in a way that protects them, in a way that amplifies their voice, in a way that gives them power. And so I think about my own denomination, which is one of the flavors of Presbyterianism, and our courts. So we've got 3 different courts. One's called the Session, one's called Presbyterian, one's called General Assembly, and they just kind of go up in size, right? So Session is local, Presbyterian is regional, General Assembly is national. And they have to have a ratio of what's called 2 ruling elders to 1 teaching elder. So 2 lay people to every pastor, which I think is absolutely fantastic to be able to have that. because what it does is it pushes power down to the layperson, down to the regular church member, where the power in the church should be. That we as pastors can't just dominate and control everything. And I don't know if that's going to happen outside of a denomination. From what I've seen, the non-denominational or the independent churches, the pastors tend to have all the power. And they can dominate, and they can oppress, and they can hurt. And there's not a whole lot anybody can do to stop them. And that's not good. It's just not good. And so that's, I guess that's the second thing that I really, really like about the denominational system or structures, is that it provides good accountability for us as pastors. And then the last thing that has really struck me recently is this issue of rootedness. I have thought so much about being rooted in the context of theology or doctrine, and those things seem to be so deep and weighty and all that kind of thing. And what we believe really matters. And so what being a part of a denomination does is it helps us root in some essential ideas, in some essential theological concepts that really form, I guess, a bit of an orbit for us, right? That we're able to kind of not go too far. And one of the things that I think a good denomination does is it provides space. It provides room within those confines. But it always provides a center. And so in our denomination, we talk about essentials and non-essentials. And those essentials are relatively few. And because we have these essential ideas, because we have these essential beliefs, we can kind of know where that everybody holds to a center. But then, because we embrace non-essentials, because we're able to say, hey, those issues are non-essential, we're able to expand, we're able to play, we're able to think, we're able to wrestle, we're able to doubt. We're able to push the envelope on some different things. We're able to ask and wrestle with questions. And that, I think, is really, really helpful. But we never quite go spinning out into a place that's kind of off the rails. And so this idea of rootedness is in our theology, in our beliefs, in our doctrines, I think is really helpful. I think the other thing that roots us is the structure. Is a denomination provides us with some handles to hold on to, some hooks to grab onto, you could say, that helps us kind of know how to organize and how to structure a few things. I think that's helpful because, again, that doesn't allow us to just kind of fly off into our own deals. It keeps us from being kind of the kings of our own universe, the kings of our own kingdom, and so it centers and roots us in something that's deeper and maybe a little bit more long lasting than the immediate. Because here's the deal: as pastors, I think as church leaders, we are often caught up in the immediate, right? We are caught up in the here and now. We don't oftentimes see the big picture when there's a crisis, when there is just something so big happening that we can't we can't see the forest for the trees, We can't see the forest for the trees. So, and so what the centering of a denomination does for us is it provides some perspective. It helps us to see maybe the bigger picture in those moments and in those times when all we're able to focus on is the immediate. So I think there's some really beneficial things for a denomination. I think there's some good reasons why churches should be a part of denominations, and I think there's some really good reasons why maybe you shouldn't be a part of a denomination. But I think in the big picture, on the whole, historically rooted denominations are really, really helpful, and I think on the whole they're good, and I think on the whole it's better to be a part of something bigger than yourself than not. So, those are some thoughts on why I think denominations don't suck, and I hope that you will come back next week, listen again. And what we're going to be talking about next week is the scope of the gospel. What is the gospel? There's been a lot of conversation about how the gospel relates to justice and all kinds of other things, but that's another story for another podcast, and that's what's coming up next week. So thanks for listening, and remember, be awesome. Don't suck. All right, Facebook Live folks, the podcast part of this thing is over. I'm going to look through some of your questions here. If you have other questions, feel free to ask them, and we'll talk about a little bit of them. Laura says, the benefit of denominations for me is I know better what I'm getting into when I go. Absolutely. I think that's one of those things that's really, really helpful about denominations, is it at least gives you some sense of what it is that they believe, right? That when you show up at a church, it's not just some, you're not necessarily walking in blind. The tricky thing in some denominations like ours is that there's quite a bit of variance in local churches. But at least you have some sense, right? If you take a few minutes to just look at a denomination's website, you can get at least some sense of what it is that you're walking into. And yes, Laura, I agree. They are also helpful in dividing church softball teams. And from what I understand, us Presbyterians are pretty darn good at softball. Apparently we won the championship up in Brighton, so that's a good thing. Let's see. Scott asked, when I say that pastors can oppress and hurt, am I referring to the Catholic Church? Yeah, I'm referring to the Catholic Church, but I'm also referring to independent Protestant churches. There was a huge scandal within the Protestant world with a guy named Mark Driscoll, who, just tons and tons and tons of spiritual abuse, and hurt a lot of people, but surrounded himself with yes men and yes women, and that wasn't great. Recently, Willow Creek's own scandal. Probably, Willow Creek was the founding church, really, of the church growth movement coming out of the 70s and into the 80s. And what we've learned about them is that there was no accountability there for Bill Hybels, and he just kind of did whatever it is that he wanted to do, and again, surrounded by yes people for so long, and because there was no greater accountability, there were no structures outside of that local congregation for the people who were being hurt to move to kind of challenge what was going on, the hurt continued, and the oppression continued. And so yeah, I think that's not just a Catholic thing, sadly, and it's not just a Christian thing. I mean, look at what happened at Michigan State, right? Look at what happened at Ohio State. Look at what happened at Penn State. This happens in the sports world. This happens in companies, in business. Just do a little search on the hashtag #MeToo, and you begin to see what happens when you don't have structures in place for people to get outside of and move into a place where there are helpful structures to kind of overcome some of these things. So yeah, let's see. Scott asked another question. What if your rootedness is set in a denomination that cleaves to snake handling or golden plates? Yeah, there are bad denominations without a doubt, and those those things are rooted in their beliefs, and those are wrong and messed up beliefs. And so, but like Laura said, at least you can read and you can check in there, and you can see what it is they believe before you jump in. So, David, my buddy David Brown, former pastor in South Lyon, he says, I hope to support you in these 3 areas you've mentioned. And David, you're a model of that, and you've always cared for the pastors in our denomination. You've been a mentor to a lot of guys, and I know you are deeply, deeply appreciated. Ryan with the deep one, right? With thousands of denominations to choose from, doesn't this present the problem that no one denomination has more truth than any other? And sadly, Facebook cuts off the rest here. I can't really see what else you said. This is something about, wouldn't this be a good reason why? I don't know. So here's the deal. Ryan, that's a great question. And here's, most denominations really hold to similar essential beliefs, kind of core ideas there. And so I don't know if there's necessarily that one denomination has more truth than any other. I don't think that's an accurate way of describing it, because most denominations are separated by structure more than anything else. So you think about Presbyterian, which is what I'm a denomination that we're a part of. Presbyterian is a form of church government, and that's what makes us Presbyterian, is that we elect representative leaders from the congregation that represent the congregation and give leadership to the congregation as men and women who have been elected out of that congregation. And then we have our graded courts that I talked about earlier, where you have your local, which is called a session, your regional, which is presbytery, and your general assembly, which is national. And so that's what separates us out from many other denominations, simply our government. It's not an issue of true or who has more truth, but simply, just the shape of the church. Other churches are congregational, where they have to vote on everything as a congregation all the time. And so that's the thing. There might be certain core doctrines or beliefs that we disagree on. So, for instance, Baptists believe that you have to be an adult, or you have to make this profession of faith as an adult before you can get baptized, whereas Reformed folks hold to a position where no, baptism is rightly administered to infants. So again, it's not. I don't think it's necessarily more truth or less truth. I think there's a lot more to it than that. So why many are leaving the church? Gotcha. Yeah, I don't think that's why many are leaving the church. Maybe this is a podcast or a Facebook Live conversation for another time. But I think the reason why many are leaving the church really has very little to do with denominations and has a whole lot to do with the fact that many Christians don't seem to be living out a life that is in any way reflective of the person they claim to follow. Jesus said, "Come follow me," and man, it seems like most of us, or many of us, aren't coming and following him. We're kind of coming and following ourselves, or doing whatever it is that we want to do, or coming and following a certain political party in seeking power and that kind of stuff. So I'd probably argue many are leaving the church because of just rampant hypocrisy and a failure of people who they respect, who they look up to actually live out a Christian life. That there appears to be absolutely no validity to this faith we say we follow, because so many of us, by and large, don't seem to really follow it at all. So I think that has a lot more to do with it than the denominations. I think once people are outside the church, then they could look back and say, well, and use the denomination thing as a way to make themselves feel better. Maybe, I don't know. So hypocrisy in verifiable facts, though, which each denomination claims to have. I'm not sure what you mean there. So, Ryan, what we need to do is we need to get our podcast together so we can have this in a back and forth, a little clearer back and forth conversation. And maybe we need to get this thing up and rolling, dude. But again, I think if what I understand you saying there, though, it just kind of goes back to the original thing where the denominations really, as far as beliefs go, are the same. There's really not much difference other than church government, some structural things, and maybe potentially a view on baptism or something along those lines. But as far as core fundamental Christian belief, what we in our denomination would call essential beliefs, I see most of them just kind of cutting across. They all seem to pretty much be the same. So I'm not sure that there's a lot of denominations that are necessarily going to battle against denominations, outside of maybe what took place, with Martin Luther and the Catholic Church. It's been a while, and there are some other social issues that denominations are wrestling with potentially right now against one another, but it doesn't really go to the essentials of faith. So, but yeah, that is but bro, we got to get this thing together. We got to get this podcast rolling. So, any other questions? Anything else you guys want me to address regarding this whole denominations thing? If not, gonna take a look here real quick and just see. Doesn't look like it. So hey, next week, come back, watch again, engage again, and watch for the podcast as it comes out here later today. Thanks for stopping by, guys. And there's a question. What would your suggestion be to bring unity to all of the denominations of the church? What does that look like? Ooh. Yeah. Man, John, I don't know if I have a suggestion for that. Other than, the Baptists figuring out that infant baptism's okay. I'm kidding. There are probably people who are really offended now. That's what I do. So, outside of outside of a massive church council, like the legit kind that we used to have back in the, 4th, 5th, 6th century, that kind of thing, I think it's going to be really tough. I think it's going to be really tough to bring the Orthodox Church, the Catholic Church, and the Protestant Church together. I think it's going to be really tough to bring. I think it's going to be really tough to bring all the Protestant denominations together. I think probably, in all seriousness, what it's going to take is a pretty significant move by God to change the hearts of Christians, to help us set aside the things that really truly are non-essential, to help us that we would set aside our pride, our humility, that kind of thing. A little follow-up. I was getting all serious. Unity in the sense of getting along and being on mission together, not on the same page theologically. You know what? I think that's happening, honestly. I think that bit, I think more and more we are getting along. I think you see things, like I think about just Washtenaw County, in Ypsilanti in particular, the churches here get along great. They partner with one another very well. We do some good things together. Washtenaw County has an organization called PACT that I haven't connected with because I've been much more focused hyper locally here in Ypsi. But PACT does a lot of great things, and so I think in a lot of ways we're starting to see that happen. But I think for us to see that happen more, we have to set aside our desire to be the kings of our own kingdoms. We have to stop asking the questions of, what do I get out of this from partnering? Who gets the contacts? Who gets the follow-ups? Who gets the people to show up to their church? And until we can do that, that's going to really limit our ability to be on mission together. There was a big citywide initiative a number of years ago, and it all started out well and good, right up until a few of the churches there kind of got. They decided that they were going to be the ones to take all the people, so to speak. And so other churches got upset and bent out of shape because they weren't going to grow. But these other churches were going to grow. And man, that's ridiculous, because there's one church, right? There's the kingdom. And until we can set aside our business models, CEO as pastor, or pastor as CEO, church as business, producing widgets, I think it's going to be really, really hard to be on mission together, because at the back of so many people's minds, the question will always be there of, what do I get out of this? Will my church grow? Will I get new people? And if I don't, then I don't want to play, because I need to make sure that my church is growing, that butts and seats are there are more butts and seats, there are more bucks coming in, so I can build my bigger, better building. And so, yeah, maybe that's overly cynical. But I'd go back even to that question, I guess, and say a move of God. He's got to set aside our humility. So, yeah, guys, thanks again. I'm going to try to finalize this recording, and we'll be back next week. So thanks for watching, and remember, be awesome. Don't suck.